Maya Johnson had never known anything but luxury. The only daughter of Ethan Johnson, she grew up in an immense villa nestled in the heart of a verdant estate. The gardens were filled with exotic flowers and marble fountains, the winding paths lined with majestic statues. Inside, the house abounded with priceless works of art, crystal chandeliers, and centuries-old tapestries that gave the impression that time itself had stood still. The servants, devoted and silent, carried out Maya's every wish with almost military precision. From an early age, Maya learned to navigate this world of opulence and privilege. She spent her days strolling in the gardens or reading old books in the library, whose walls were covered with rare, dusty volumes that few people had ever touched. Her father, Ethan Johnson, was a powerful and influential man, not only in business, but also in more secretive circles. Maya didn't understand it all, but she knew that her father held a power that few dared to challenge. Ethan was an imposing man, at once distant and affectionate. He loved his daughter more than anything, but there was always a part of himself he kept hidden. The grand receptions held in their home were frequent, and Maya, despite her young age, noticed that the guests were often the same. Men in impeccable suits, with piercing stares, chatted in low voices over glasses of wine. They never really smiled, and their conversations always seemed tinged with gravity. One evening, while discreetly observing the guests from a gallery overlooking the grand salon, she spotted her father deep in conversation with a stern-looking older man. The man handed her a small box, which Ethan quickly slipped into the inside pocket of his jacket before shaking his hand. At that moment, the man looked up at the gallery and met Maya's gaze. He smiled slightly, a cold smile that sent a shiver down the girl's spine. She stepped back hastily, her heart pounding, aware that she had just witnessed something beyond her comprehension. Despite all the luxury that surrounded her, Maya always felt a palpable tension in the air, a kind of secret hidden behind the formal smiles and handshakes. Her father offered her everything a girl could want: jewelry, dresses, travel. But he also hid something darker. There were nights when Maya would hear him walking alone in his study, speaking in hushed tones into the telephone, muffled words that evoked words like covenant, promise, and sacrifice. Maya, though still too young to fully understand, sensed that her father's life was more complicated than she could have imagined. One summer night, when she was only 8, her curiosity got the better of her. The manor house was plunged into darkness, the servants asleep, and only the sound of tree branches brushing against the windows disturbed the silence. Maya slipped out of bed, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, and crept discreetly to her father's study, whose door was ajar. This was a forbidden room, a sanctuary where Ethan often retired after long evenings of entertaining, and no one, not even her, was allowed in. Through the opening, Maya caught a glimpse of a scene that marked her forever. Around a circular table, several men dressed in dark robes were gathered, their faces partially hidden by hoods. Flickering candle flames cast ominous shadows on the walls. Ethan, seated in the center, appeared to be their leader. He spoke with cold authority, his hands resting on a large book whose pages were yellowed with age. Maya couldn't hear every word, but fragments of conversation reached her ears. Sacrifice, destiny, bloodline, and brotherhood. These words swirled in her mind, heavy with meaning, but she didn't yet understand their full import. At one point, her father looked up and met Maya's gaze. A wave of terror swept over her, as if she'd been discovered uncovering an ancient, forbidden secret. She stepped back abruptly, heart pounding, and ran to her room, breathless. She lay awake all night, eyes wide open, her mind lost in unanswered questions. She knew from that moment on that her life would never be quite normal. A few days later, a strange event shook the Johnson family. Maya was taking a stroll with her father by a man-made lake on their estate. Ethan had always taught her to appreciate the tranquil beauty of the place, but on this day, the tension was palpable. As they walked, they spotted one of the men who had been present at the secret meeting. He was talking to someone Maya had never seen before. Suddenly, without warning, the man threw himself into the lake, as if seized by an unexplained frenzy. Maya turned to her father in horror, but Ethan remained strangely calm. He gestured to the other man, who dived in without hesitation to bring back the man who had just jumped. They exchanged a few words that Maya couldn't hear, then her father turned to her. "Let's go home, Maya," he said in a firm voice. On the way home, Maya remained silent, trying to understand what had just happened. Her father had given no explanation. When he arrived home, he ordered her never to speak again of what she had seen that day. A few weeks later, driven by irrepressible curiosity, Maya found a diary hidden in her father's desk drawer. It was handwritten, with disturbing details of ancient rituals and sacrifices. The diary mentioned a secret brotherhood, an organization of which her father seemed to be a prominent member. There were also mentions of pacts and debts of honor, as well as an enigmatic prophecy concerning the child who would prolong the lineage. Maya closed the diary, trembling, gradually realizing that she was involved in something far greater and more dangerous than she could have imagined. Years had passed since that fateful night when Maya had surprised her father in a secret meeting, surrounded by men in dark robes. Now an accomplished young woman, she had everything to succeed: beauty, intelligence, and above all, the legacy of her father, Ethan Johnson, a powerful man respected in circles far beyond traditional business. However, this legacy came with a growing shadow, a silent threat hovering over her. Maya had always known that her father was hiding something from her, but when he suddenly fell ill, everything changed. The doctors spoke of heart problems, suggesting a rapid degeneration of the heart. Yet deep down, Maya knew this was not the whole truth. She remembered her father, a strong, lively man who had suddenly become weak and tired. On his deathbed, his last words still echoed in her mind. "There's a price to pay for everything, Maya. Never forget that." These words haunted Maya months after the funeral. In her dreams, she saw the image of her father, his face marked by fatigue and fear, as if he knew what awaited him. With each dream, her father's face grew darker and darker until one night, in her sleep, she saw him chained, his eyes pleading, uttering over and over again the words, "The pact. Maya, you must respect the pact." She woke up with a start, drenched in sweat, her heart beating wildly. She knew something was wrong. A few days later, as she began to organize the management of her father's business, Maya received an unexpected visit from her aunt, Camille. Camille was Ethan's younger sister, a gentle-looking woman with a piercing gaze. She had always been present in Maya's life, but there was a distance between them that Maya could never explain. Camille always seemed to know more than she let on, and on this day, her visit was not innocent. "Maya," she said gravely, sitting down on a leather armchair in her late brother's study, "it's time you knew the truth." Maya frowned, leaning back against her desk. "The truth about what?" Camille took a deep breath, her gaze darkening. "Your father wasn't just a successful businessman, Maya. He belonged to a secret brotherhood, an ancient order whose members pass on power and fortune from generation to generation." Maya widened her eyes, remembering the snippets of conversations she'd overheard years before, the whispers, the nightly meetings, and those mysterious words like sacrifice and bloodline. "A brotherhood," murmured Maya, almost incredulous. Camille nodded. "Yes, and for you to inherit everything he built, you must honor the pact he made. Ethan knew his time was running out. He protected you for as long as he could, but now they're coming for you." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. Who are they? Camille looked at her intensely. These are the members of the Black Brotherhood. They control forces that few understand. Your father was one of them, and you, Maya, are their heir. They have asked me to tell you that your time has come. If you don't respect their conditions, everything your father built will be taken away from you, and your life will be in danger. Maya stepped back, shocked. She tried to process what her aunt had just told her, but her mind refused to accept it. I never asked to be involved in any of this, she cried. He never talked about any of this. He only prepared me to take over the business. Camille, impassive, shook her head. Your father hid this from you to protect you, but he knew you'd eventually be confronted with this truth. There are forces greater than money and business at play here, Maya. The Brotherhood won't wait. They're already watching you. The days that followed this conversation were a waking nightmare for Maya. Everything around her seemed to fall apart. Company accounts were mysteriously frozen, contracts disappeared, and long-standing partners suddenly ceased all communication. Stranger still, she began to see men in black loitering near her house, faces she didn't recognize, but who always seemed to be stalking her. She felt spied on, stalked. One night, on her way home late from a meeting, Maya sensed a presence behind her as she approached her front door. She turned abruptly and saw a dark silhouette in the shade of a tree. Who are you? She shouted. But the intruder didn't answer. He merely stared at her for a few moments, then vanished into the darkness as if he'd never existed. The next day, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a simple piece of paper on which were inscribed 3 words, "Time is running out." Maya, terrified but determined to understand what was happening, went to her father's old office. She rummaged through his belongings, looking for a clue, a trace of the Brotherhood Camille had mentioned. Then she came across a secret compartment in her desk drawer. Inside, she found an old, weathered black leather notebook. Opening it, she discovered coded inscriptions, symbols she didn't understand, and passages referring to sacrifices and blood rituals. There was also a list of names, men she'd seen at home, at her father's secret receptions. Another sentence caught her attention. The child of the bloodline must take the father's place, or blood will flow. Maya felt an icy chill run down her spine. This was all taking a much darker and more worrying turn than she had imagined. One evening, as she locked herself in her study to examine the documents she had discovered, Maya received an unexpected visit from a man she had never seen before. He wore a black suit, his hair perfectly combed, but his eyes shone with an unhealthy gleam. "Are you Maya Johnson?" he asked in a suave but ominous voice. "Who are you?" retorted Maya, defensively. The man smiled gently. "I'm here to remind you of your obligations. Your father made a pact, and now it's up to you to keep it. If you refuse, everything you own will disappear. And believe me, you don't want to know what happens to those who ignore the Brotherhood." Maya tried to reply, but the man had already disappeared, leaving only a threatening silence. Maya realized that her life would never be the same again. Mysterious forces were at work against her, and every day her grip on reality seemed to weaken. Her father's fortune, once a source of security, was evaporating before her very eyes. The Brotherhood's men were everywhere, in the shadows, ready to force her to follow the path laid out for her. But Maya was not ready to submit. She knew that if she didn't quickly find a way to free herself from this hold, she would be drawn into a downward spiral from which she could never escape. Yet her father's rituals and the Brotherhood's obligations weighed heavily on her. A struggle between family duty and her desire for freedom lay ahead, and Maya knew that one of the two would ultimately destroy her. Maya thought she'd reached the bottom of the abyss when she discovered the true origins of her father's fortune, but this was only the beginning of her nightmare. The truth, brutal and implacable, was revealed to her during a secret meeting with Marcus, the Grand Master of the Brotherhood to which Ethan belonged. The cold, Dark air of the isolated mansion where the meeting took place contrasted with the suffocating heat of her inner anguish. Sitting in a large room lit only by candlesticks, Maya listened attentively to Marcus. The room seemed to suck in light, and the walls, covered in ancient, esoteric symbols, added to the gloomy atmosphere. Marcus' face was partly hidden by shadow, but his icy smile was visible, devoid of emotion. "Maya," he began in a slow, measured tone, "your father made many sacrifices to give you this life. But every pact sealed with the Brotherhood demands its tribute. You are the key to his legacy. For the lineage to continue and for you to inherit this power, you must give birth to a son within the next 3 months. A son who will be the future of this Brotherhood." Maya felt an icy chill run down her spine. She knew this moment would come, but hearing it phrased with such finality terrified her. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Marcus sketched a wider, cruel smile. "If you refuse, everything your father has built will collapse. You'll be ruined, rejected, and you'll lose more than your money. The Brotherhood never forgets, and those who fail in their obligations." He left his sentence hanging, but Maya understood the implicit threat. It wasn't just a question of fortune. It was a question of survival. Back home, Maya tried to rationalize the situation. 3 months. That was all she had left to escape or succumb to this fate. Yet every time she tried to conceive a child with her husband, David, an inexplicable force seemed to come between them. The first time this happened, David, normally affectionate and gentle, had abruptly risen from bed, eyes wide, trembling as if struck by a sudden fever. I can't, Maya. It's like something's holding me back," he said, his gaze shifty and confused. The second time was even stranger. While they were in the throes of intimacy, David became aggressive, his features distorted by sudden rage. "Maya, stop it," he shouted, backing away abruptly, his hands trembling. "I feel strange whenever you come near me. It's like I'm not myself anymore." A distraught Maya tried to calm him down, but David remained silent, as if possessed by an unknown force. The once solid and loving relationship they shared seemed to be crumbling under the grip of this invisible power. Convinced that this strange force was linked to the Brotherhood, Maya decided to consult Marcus again. She went to an old monastery on the outskirts of town, a place the Brotherhood used for their secret meetings. The driving rain and the lightning that tore the sky made the atmosphere even more oppressive. Entering the monastery's immense hall, she found Marcus sitting in the dark, as if waiting for her. "You must follow the ritual to the letter," he declared coldly, his gaze piercing Maya like a blade. "The pact demands a sacrifice on your part. Your father sealed this agreement long ago, and if you fail, not only will you lose everything, but you risk far more than ruin." Maya leaned forward, her gaze filled with distress. "Why is David acting this way? It's as if he's possessed. Why can't we conceive this child?" Marcus was silent for a moment, then resumed in a somber voice. "Your father protected his bloodline with powerful spells, but all that comes at a cost. For this child to be born, you must perform a specific ritual. You must purge David of the forces that are disturbing him. The blood must flow to free the spirit of the bloodline." Desperate, Maya reluctantly agreed to follow Marcus' instructions. The ritual was to take place in the middle of an ancient forest, on the very spot where Ethan had once sealed his own pact. This place, known as the Wood of Shadows, was surrounded by dark legends. Neighboring villagers avoided the place, claiming that ghostly voices echoed in the darkness of the trees and that those who entered never returned the same. On the night of the ritual, Maya and David went into the forest, accompanied by Camille and 2 members of the Brotherhood. They reached a clearing lit only by moonlight. At the center of this clearing was an ancient stone, covered with symbols engraved in a language forgotten for centuries. Marcus waited there, dressed in a black robe, his stern face lit by the flames of the torches. "David must drink the blood of the sacrifice," Marcus announced, holding out a ceremonial knife to Maya. This will purify his spirit and enable him to conceive the child destined to prolong the bloodline. Maya trembled as she took the weapon in her hands. "What sacrifice?" she asked, her throat constricted. Marcus pointed to a black goat tied to a tree nearby. "Tonight, she is the bridge between your past and your future. Blood will open the way." With no other choice, Maya performed the ritual. The animal's scream pierced the night as its blood dripped onto the sacred stone. David, wide-eyed, swallowed the reddish liquid, his hands trembling violently. For a moment, silence fell over the clearing. Then, suddenly, David collapsed to the ground, convulsing. Maya rushed to him, terrified. "David! David, answer me!" Marcus calmly stepped forward, impassive to the chaotic scene unfolding before his eyes. "Don't worry, Maya. This is just the beginning. He's walking through the gates of power." David finally calmed down, his breathing panting. When he opened his eyes, they had changed. A cold, strange gleam reflected in them, as if something else were looking through him. "Now," Marcus said with eerie satisfaction, "he's ready. You can conceive the heir." Back home, Maya and David began to feel the effects of the ritual. David seemed back to his old self, but something about him had changed. He was more distant, more silent. Nights were marked by recurring nightmares in which he saw faces distorted by pain and anger. Maya, for her part, felt increasingly trapped in a web of intrigue from which she could not escape. One evening, as they lay in bed, David turned to her, his eyes staring at the ceiling. "I don't know what's happening to me, Maya. I feel something inside me, a force I can't control." Maya took his hand, trying to reassure him. "We'll get through this, David. It's almost over." But deep down, Maya knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The Pact of Shadows had chained her to a destiny she could no longer control. And as she made her way through the darkness, she couldn't help wondering, what had she really sacrificed to preserve this legacy? The pressure had become unbearable. Every day, Maya felt the stranglehold of the Brotherhood tightening around her. Nightmares, veiled threats, and David's transformation weighed heavily on her. But deep inside her, a flame of rebellion still burned. She refused to submit completely to the destiny that had been mapped out for her without her consent. She had lost her father, seen her life plunged into darkness, but she still had a choice: fight or lose. Maya decided to flee, to leave the country and disappear with David. They decided to draw up a plan in secret. At night, in the privacy of their bedrooms, they drew maps, contacted smugglers, and planned their departure. Their goal was to cross the border to a country where the Brotherhood would no longer have any hold over them. One evening, when the moon was hidden by dark clouds, Maya made a radical decision. She entered her father's study and stole an ancient medallion he had always kept hidden. This medallion, according to the rumors she'd heard, possessed an ancient power capable of thwarting the Brotherhood's spells. It was their only chance of escape. Maya and David left the house in the middle of the night, their backpacks packed with provisions and cash. The rain pounded the ground, making their departure even more discreet, but also more difficult. The car they'd rented was waiting for them a few blocks away. David, nervous, kept his gaze fixed on the horizon while Maya checked their itinerary. "We'll make it, Maya," David murmured as he started the car, his hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. But deep down, Maya knew it wouldn't be that easy. The Brotherhood was watching them. The shadows were still on the prowl, ready to intervene at the slightest attempt at rebellion. Halfway to the border, as they sped along an isolated road, Maya sensed a presence. Headlights suddenly appeared behind them. A black car was following close behind, its lights flashing insistently. Maya's heart clenched. "David, they're here." David accelerated, but the black car didn't give way. It came closer and closer, until a violent impact shook their vehicle. "They're trying to run us off the road," shouted David. A frantic chase began on the winding roads, the rain making the pavement slippery. Maya, her hands clenched on the seat, watched the blinding lights coming dangerously close. "Go faster," she shouted, panic rising. But they couldn't outrun them. The black car drew closer again, then another appeared in front of them, blocking their path. They were surrounded. David braked hard, sending the car into a controlled skid. The tires screeched on the wet asphalt. But it was too late. They were trapped. The doors of the black cars opened and several men in dark suits stepped out, looking impassive despite the driving rain. They advanced towards Maya and David, their faces hidden under hoods. A shiver of fear ran through Maya as she recognized them. They were members of the Brotherhood. "You can't run away, Maya," one of the men declared as he approached, his voice calm but authoritative. "The pact is sealed, and you must honor your commitment." David instinctively stepped in front of Maya, fists clenched. "Stand back. Let us go." A cold smile appeared on the leader's face. "You don't get it, do you? You can't escape your destiny. The blood pact was signed long before you were born. Your father sacrificed everything for you. Accept your role or you will be destroyed." David, in a final act of bravery, threw himself at one of the men in an attempt to subdue him, but was quickly overwhelmed. Two members of the Brotherhood tackled him to the ground with disconcerting ease. Maya, paralyzed with fear, watched the scene in horror. "David," she cried, trying to reach him, but was held back by a firm grip. "It's no use, Maya," echoed a voice behind her. She turned slowly to face Marcus, who stood there, calm and impassive. His penetrating gaze cut through the rain, unruffled. "You can't run away," he said, moving slowly toward her. "Everything you've done so far was planned. Do you really think you can escape your destiny? Your father sacrificed everything for you, and you must honor that pact. It's the only way for the bloodline to continue." Maya, exhausted and desperate, felt anger bubbling up inside her.
Why?
"Why must I sacrifice everything for a cause I never chose?" Marcus looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Because, Maya, that's how things work in our world. Power is never given, it's taken. Your father took that power to give you this life. And now it's your turn to pay the price." Maya knew she couldn't run forever. She realized she was caught in a trap that had been designed long before she was born. But she wasn't ready to give up. She had to find a way to turn the situation in her favor. Just before the Brotherhood men grabbed her to take her away, Maya felt her father's medallion in her pocket. She hadn't yet fully understood its power, but she knew it was her only chance. She pulled it out with a jerk and held it up to Marcus. The Brotherhood men stopped dead in their tracks, staring at the medallion with visible fear. Marcus stepped back slightly, his eyes crinkling. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice harder than before. Maya felt fear growing inside her, but she couldn't show her weakness. "This medallion belonged to my father. I know it holds a power you cannot control." Marcus gritted his teeth, clearly furious. "Your father was a powerful man, but even he couldn't escape the rules of the Brotherhood. This medallion won't save you." Maya stared at him, determined. "Maybe not, but I'm ready to fight to the bitter end." The medallion emitted a faint golden glow, and an invisible shockwave spread around them. The Brotherhood stepped back, shaken. Marcus, fists clenched, looked at Maya with eyes filled with hatred. "You can't defy us forever, Maya. You can't run away from what's inside you." Maya, her eyes staring into his, replied calmly, "I'm not running. I fight." The men in black slowly withdrew, and Marcus, though furious, resigned himself. "It's only a reprieve, Maya. You can't escape the consequences forever. We'll be back for you." Maya, despite the fear in her stomach, straightened proudly. "Then I'll wait for you." As the black cars disappeared into the night, Maya turned to David, still on the ground, exhausted but alive. She helped him to his feet, looking at him with a new intensity. "We have to get ready," she murmured. "It's not over yet." But I refuse to let them control me. David, though wounded, nodded. "I'm with you no matter what." The rain continued to fall, but for the first time in a long time, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. She knew she had taken the first step towards her rebellion, and although the path would be difficult, she was ready to face whatever came. Back home, Maya was on the verge of despair. Her plan to escape with David had failed, the Brotherhood had reasserted its hold, and the threat of an imposed fate seemed inevitable. Yet, despite everything, a small spark of rebellion remained within her. She remembered her father's words on his deathbed, "There's always a price to pay." These words looped in her mind, a glimmer of truth hidden behind the darkness of family secrets. Maya knew that the battle would not be won by running away. She had to confront the source of her misfortune, the Brotherhood itself. And to do that, she had to be more cunning, more audacious, and above all, not show the slightest weakness. One night, when the full moon lit up the sky with a ghostly glow, Maya decided to act. She went alone to the Brotherhood's secret temple, an ancient place hidden in a dense forest outside the city. Maya had heard of this temple through her father's diaries, but had never set foot inside. It was described as a sacred sanctuary where Brotherhood members gathered to seal their darkest pacts. The path to the temple was gloomy. The trees seemed to bow under the weight of ancient secrets, and the air was charged with a strange, almost oppressive energy. Maya walked with determination, her father's medallion clutched in her hand, knowing that this was her only protection against the occult forces she was about to face. When she reached the temple's imposing gates, she took a deep breath. She was not the weak girl they thought they could manipulate. She wasn't a slave destined to obey without question. She was a Johnson, and she was going to fight. The temple doors opened before her with a dull roar, revealing an immense hall lit by candlesticks and flickering torches. Strange symbols adorned the walls, and in the center of the room stood a stone altar, austere and imposing. The members of the Brotherhood stood there, dressed in their dark robes, their faces hidden beneath their hoods. At their head, Marcus, impassive as ever, awaited her with calculated coldness. Maya strode confidently forward, her footsteps echoing through the room. The silence was heavy, almost palpable. When Maya stopped in front of them, she raised her head and stared Marcus straight in the eye. "I will not be your slave," she declared in a firm voice. "If I have to sacrifice anything, it won't be my freedom." Marcus watched her for a moment, his face barely concealing a mixture of respect and contempt. "So, what do you propose, Maya?" She knew this moment would be decisive. She couldn't hope to defeat the Brotherhood alone, but she could play their own game against them. She took a deep breath before launching her proposal. "I'll give you the child you ask for. But in exchange, I want complete control over my father's estate. And I want the freedom to manage that fortune without any interference from you." A murmur of surprise passed through the assembly. The members of the Brotherhood exchanged glances, clearly astonished by Maya's audacity. But Marcus remained impassive, his piercing gaze staring at Maya as if evaluating every word she uttered. After a few moments' silence, Marcus sketched a cold smile. "Very well, Maya. We accept. But remember, every sacrifice has a price." Maya sat up, her heart beating wildly. She knew she'd just signed a dangerous pact, but she couldn't see any other way out. She got what she wanted, but at what price? After their agreement, the Brotherhood informed Maya that a ritual had to be performed to ensure the child's birth. This ritual would be a crucial event, and Maya had to submit to it, whatever it entailed. She agreed, although concern was growing inside her. The ritual was to take place during the next lunar eclipse, a rare phenomenon that Marcus believed would strengthen the mystical ties between the Brotherhood and the Johnson bloodline. The date was fast approaching, and Maya knew that this ritual would seal her fate. On the evening of the eclipse, Maya and David were led to the temple by members of the Brotherhood. The tension was palpable. The temple seemed even more imposing under the reddish light of the eclipsed moon. Inside, the stone altar was covered with symbols drawn in blood. Dark chants echoed in the air, adding a heavy, mysterious atmosphere. Marcus stepped towards Maya, holding a chalice filled with a blackish liquid. "Drink this," he ordered in a deep voice. "This will mark the beginning of the ritual." Maya, her gaze determined, took the chalice without hesitation. But as she brought the liquid to her lips, she felt an invisible hand clutch her throat. A choking sensation overcame her. She staggered, and David barely caught her. "What have you done to her?" cried David, furious. Marcus, unperturbed, simply replied, "The ritual requires a strong bond between the unborn child and our brotherhood. Maya must pass this ordeal if the lineage is to be assured. If she fails, all will be lost." Maya felt her mind waver. The black liquid had awakened nightmarish visions in her. She saw terrifying scenes, faces distorted by pain, bloody hands reaching out towards her, and in the midst of it all, her father, Ethan, in chains, begging her to put an end to this infernal cycle. But in the midst of these visions, an inner strength awakened within her. A strength she had never suspected. Her father's medallion, which she always wore around her neck, emitted a brilliant light, dispelling the darkness around her. Maya sat up abruptly, her eyes shining with a new gleam. She turned to Marcus, a triumphant smile on her lips. "You have underestimated my power. It is not I who will bend before you. It is you who will bend before me." The light emanating from the medallion grew in intensity, forcing the Brotherhood members backwards, blinded. Marcus, unsettled for the first time, took a step back. "What the—" Maya stepped toward him, the medallion projecting flashes of light throughout the room. "You thought you could control me, but no more. I'm taking what's mine, and you'll never have power over me again." In a final act of rebellion, Maya shattered the chalice at her feet, dissipating the magic that was attempting to bind her to the Brotherhood. The symbols engraved on the temple walls vanished instantly, and the stunned members of the Brotherhood retreated into the shadows. Maya, now free of their chains, took David's hand and rushed out of the temple. Behind them, the building was gradually collapsing under the power released by the medallion. The chanting had ceased, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. "It's over," Maya murmured as she ran, her hand clasped in David's. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a new era. She had taken control of her life and her father's fortune, but the Brotherhood, though wounded, was not destroyed. She would have to be vigilant, as Marcus and the others would not let her off so easily. She'd won this battle, but the war against the Brotherhood wasn't over. And now, with her father's power in her hands, Maya was ready to face the darkness that continued to lurk. If you want to know what happens next in this incredible episode, let us know in the comments. See you next time for a new episode.